Now available in paperback and coming to Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, Dark Succubus. The man who rules the world is tempted by a sultry succubus in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Dark Succubus in paperback or pre-order on Kindle Unlimited today. Recently, Warner Brothers announced that reviled comic book writer Tom King would be writing the screenplay for New Gods, the film that is supposed to be directed by Ava DuVernay. And with this announcement that Tom King would be the writer of the New Gods film, I have to wonder what they're smoking over at Warner Brothers, because they have to be on some kind of stuff to go out here and recruit Tom King to write a screenplay when this man has shown that he cannot even finish a comic book story and provide a satisfactory conclusion. Now, in the minds of Warner Brothers, they're thinking that Tom King is the right man to write a screenplay because of his so-called critically acclaimed run on Mr. Miracle, the maxi series that he did just a year ago that won awards. However, when it comes down to comic book awards these days, they really don't have that much merit. And when I look at Tom King's writing as of late on the Batman series, that is an omen to me about the New Gods screenplay and how absolutely terrible it will be. Because when it comes down to your Tom King, as a writer, he has some serious issues as related to craft. And the first issue that Tom King has as related to craft is that he just can't pay a story off. Now, your Tom King is very good at setting up premises like he did with the Batman run, the Mr. Miracle story, and even the Vision comic book. However, when it comes down to your Tom King, when it's time to build that story up to a satisfying climax and have a satisfying conclusion, this is where your Tom King falls apart as a writer. Your Tom King is a master of setup, but he is horrific as related to payoff. And in screenwriting, if you cannot pay a story off, then the audience is not going to enjoy the film, because they're going to sit there and become frustrated by the story having plot holes, character inconsistencies, and characters not participating in consistent actions, and that's going to take people out of a movie. And again, I look at Tom King's inability to pay off a comic book story, and that does not bode well for screenwriting, because in screenwriting, the audience is a lot less forgiving than the comic book audience, because when it comes down to comic books, people will tolerate a guy like Tom King for a while, but in the movies, you get one shot at making a first impression, and if you don't make a good first impression, then the audience is going to turn on you. And that's not a good sign for Warner Brothers and DC Comics film division, which has really, as I saw it, started to get back on its feet, but then started falling back into a dysfunctional state yet again when I look at the trailers for Batwoman, and I look at the trailers for the Joker movie, and I look at the decision to hire Tom King for this New Gods film, and I see a film production company that it seems like it's going right back to its state of making bad and dysfunctional decisions, because the decision to hire Tom King to write this New Gods screenplay, this is a disaster waiting to happen. I believe Warner Brothers executives should have looked at Tom King's run on Batman after that horrific 50th issue, where your Tom King, instead of delivering on that wedding between Selina and Bruce and giving the audience the payoff it wanted, he decides to have Selina leave Bruce, and then we've gotten almost 25 issues or so of Batman, one of the most popular heroes in comic books, being turned into this emotional beta male, something that Bruce Wayne never was in the comic books before, because your Bruce Wayne, even though he broke up with Vicky Vale, Catwoman before in the Silver Age and in the post-crisis age or the pre-crisis age, he broke up with Selina then. He broke up with Nocturna, Silver St. Cloud. He's had numerous girlfriends that he's had deep emotional connections to, and Batman was able to navigate through his emotions because he was raised by Thomas Wayne, a father who instilled in him strong core values. But because your Tom King comes from a single mother household and does not know how men conduct themselves or carry themselves, he gave us this beta male Batman who was in his feelings, extremely emotional, and extremely dysfunctional. And this extremely emotional and dysfunctional beta male Batman has led to many comic fans walking away from the Batman comic, and Batman comic sales plummeting over the last, I say, about 6 or like a year or so, because we're at this in the 70s now as related to Batman. And Tom King was supposed to stay on for what was considered to be a 100-issue run, that is being cut short due to declining sales and the fact that most comic fans hate his Batman, and they hate the way he has presented Batman. And if you want to see the audience hate the New Gods, go ahead and hire Tom King to write the script. Because when it comes down to your Tom King, what he's going to do is he's going to set up these big stakes, and then as the second act of the film comes along, the film is going to fall completely apart, because your Tom King is not going to be able to keep the momentum going in the story, and he's not going to be able to pay off with a satisfying climax. And we saw that with Tom King's horrific comic event, Heroes in Crisis. Now, your Heroes in Crisis is another textbook example of how your Tom King is going to be a complete disaster as a screenwriter, because in your Heroes in Crisis, your Tom King sets up this mystery that just falls completely apart as this miniseries goes along. He sets up this miniseries where all these superheroes wind up dying, and the reason why they wind up dying is because your Wally West is supposed to have been having this trauma from seeing his family winding up disappearing and being no longer existing, and as a result, he winds up murdering all these heroes, and then winds up trying to cover it up, trying to frame Harley Quinn and Booster Gold. And what happened with this miniseries is it wound up alienating a lot of comic fans, and it wound up leading to a lot of people really getting turned off as related to Tom King and his absolutely horrific writing style. So what Warner Brothers is doing is laying part of the foundation to a complete disaster of a film, because they've hired an inexperienced screenwriter, a man who has already shown that he cannot even handle the basics of comic book storytelling, and now you're going to ask this man to write a screenplay with no real screenwriting experience, basically setting up a disaster on the level of Batman and Robin from 1997, or even worse, 2004's Catwoman, or what I believe is going to be the next unmitigated disaster after that, which was Justice League. All of these films were complete disasters, but I believe that New Gods will top all of those films, because with Tom King writing the script, we are going to be in for a film that actually surpasses these films in being absolutely terrible. Because again, your Tom King, yes, he can set up a premise, but he cannot deliver in paying it off. And to compound the problems with this New Gods film as I see it, in addition to the bad writing, they go out and get Ava DuVernay to direct this film. Now, many years ago, Ava DuVernay did show some promise in films like I Will Follow, but the way she directed the film A Wrinkle in Time shows me that she is the absolute wrong person for this project. Because when it came down to A Wrinkle in Time, your Ava DuVernay's attitude towards that film is the reason why I don't want to see her on New Gods. Because your Ava DuVernay, this woman's attitude on $100 million film was she just did not care. She did not put any passion into the film. She did not put any craft into the film. And she didn't understand how important this film was to African American fantasy genre and to the African American science fiction genre, because that was a burgeoning genre of film, and the door had been opened by Black Panther, a box office hit and the #1 movie of the year. But your Ava DuVernay, with her really lackadaisical attitude, she wound up closing the door on further African American fantasy and science fiction films by directing this Wrinkle in Time and making a complete mess on the screen, because this woman had this attitude that, one, she didn't care, and then two, she didn't really put any sort of impact on that screen to show how she's going to make a distinct statement on screen. So when I look at your Ava DuVernay, I see a director who is arrogant, full of herself, and really has this doesn't care attitude. And all of that is something that the superhero film genre does not need, because what she's going to do with that type of attitude that she has is produce an absolutely terrible film. And that film is going to be terrible because we have Tom King, a grossly unqualified screenwriter, writing a screenplay, and then we have Ava DuVernay, a director who is coming off a flop in A Wrinkle in Time. So we have a recipe for disaster as related to this New Gods film, and we have a New Gods film that I believe is going to surpass Justice League in terms of being absolutely terrible. Now, some people, they're thinking about, oh, we're going to see this so-called iconic Darkseid eating carrots on a platter, and I really wouldn't want to see that as any sort of iconic event as related to Darkseid. No, I want to see Darkseid using Omega beams to blast someone, because that's Darkseid's signature thing there. And the whole idea of the story being all about Mr. Miracle versus the female Furies, which is the supposed premise, that takes us far away from Jack Kirby's original concept as related to the Fourth World. Because as I see it, if you're going to do Fourth World, you're going to have to make it big, you're going to have to make it epic, and you have to have Orion as the main character, not Scott Free as the main character. Scott Free is good for a Mr. Miracle movie, but when you're talking New Gods, we want to see Orion front and center, because the story is about Orion front and center. And him not being the primary focus, that's an issue for me as related to if you're going to make a New Gods movie, because a New Gods movie should be big, grand, and epic, and it should be about apocalypse, and it should be about New Genesis, and I believe all those elements were never really strong in Tom King's stories, and I believe also that Ava DuVernay is just out of her depth as related to this kind of film, because in order to make a film like New Gods and on the grand scale of New Gods, you need a seasoned director who has worked with many types of fantasy and science fiction concepts, and somebody who understands how big a world the Fourth World is. And I don't believe that Ava DuVernay understands how to work with the fantasy genre, because based on what she presented in A Wrinkle in Time, it shows that she just does not have enough skills to make this kind of film. Yes, she has a critically acclaimed name, but she just does not have that skill set for this kind of film. Now, if they announced New Gods and they announced it with a really good screenwriter and Peter Jackson, then I could get behind the New Gods movie. But as it stands right now, with your Tom King, a very incompetent writer who cannot even handle a basic run of comic books as related to Batman or an event like the Heroes in Crisis, and a writer I see on a state of decline, and someone with no real screenwriting experience, I don't think we're going to get a quality screenplay as related to New Gods, material that you really have to really know in order to write a good script. And with Ava DuVernay, a director who is really arrogant and then really has this really no real focus as related to directing fantasy films, I see a complete recipe for disaster as related to this upcoming New Gods movie. And this upcoming New Gods movie, sadly, just shows how your Warner Brothers executives make decisions like crackheads. And when I look at your Warner Brothers executives, they remind me so much of Pookie from New Jack City and that dude with the cheeseburgers from Menace to Society. Because when I look at their business decisions, they are just what your Pookie or the crackhead from New Jack City would do. And it's something they would do when they were getting back on that stuff. Now, Shazam, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman, those were business decisions that really showed somebody who had already started to make efforts to get their stuff together. But when I take a look at these decisions as related to the Joker, the casting of Robert Pattinson as Batman, and this decision to hire Tom King to do the New Gods movie, it seems like somebody's been hitting that pipe once again, and they got these ashy lips, and they're going around trying to sell these cheeseburgers to people out here as related to these movies. And that's what I see when I see these Warner Brothers executives making these announcements. They remind me so much of the ashy-lipped, ashy-faced crackheads from New Jack City and Menace to Society, and they're holding up a greasy bag of cheeseburgers trying to tell us that this is going to be a great movie. And they're saying, like, they want to make us believe that this is a series of great decisions as related to this film, but in actuality, all they're doing is what a crackhead would do. And when I look at the decisions over at Warner Brothers, they show me that it's more like a bunch of crackheads, because only a crackhead continues to make the exact same mistakes and then expect to get change. And I look at these decisions overall across the board, from that disastrous Batwoman trailer to these announcements at DC Comics as related to this New Gods movie, and it just is, again, it just boggles my mind, because how are you expecting to get a hit movie from a director who made a flop over at Disney and the worst writer at DC Comics right now? When you put those two together, a flop director of A Wrinkle in Time, the worst writer at DC right now, all you can expect is a complete cinematic disaster. And that's what you're going to get, because it shows that those crackheads over at Warner Brothers haven't learned a thing about the failure of the DC cinematic universe, and they just don't seem to ever want to learn. And it seems like we're stuck in this almost 20 years of complete failure, where they just don't seem to understand how to make a decent superhero movie or try to get some momentum when you actually do get a chance at making a couple of decent films. It seems more and more like Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Shazam were the flukes, and this stuff that they're making right now is par for the course. because when I look at what they're doing right now with that Joker movie, the Robert Pattinson casting, and these other boneheaded business decisions, it's clear to me that the reason why Warner Brothers can't get anything right is because they just, as related to their superhero films, they just keep hitting that pipe. If you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. I'm raising funds to pay for the first ISIS graphic novel, and if you could donate $1 to my Patreon, I would really appreciate it. And if you want to see me for videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam Goddess of. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a demonic dominatrix in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Goddess of in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.